What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Oh, this one, the catalyst for Bryan's ascension to the top of the WWE in 2014. Back around this time period, well, at least the casual WWE fans, they didn't really give a damn about him. Personally, myself, I just saw him as another guy. It wasn't outstanding to me, but this was in the beginning of 2012. By the end of the year, he was my favorite wrestler on the entire roster. Yeah, I liked him more so than CM Punk, John Cena, all those guys. I can attribute this to the fact that he finally had a character and was involved in entertaining stories like Team Hell No, and I guess I gravitated towards the fact that he's an underdog. Like, my favorite sports teams for the most part are underdogs. Bryan wasn't the conventional face of the company that whoops ass, acts all angry, has the Superman qualities. He was like everybody else. And yeah, I guess that's why a bunch of us like the man. With that said, in regards to this title reign, Daniel Bryan finally got a character that got the fans to react to him. Like, beforehand, he wasn't really doing all that much. With the heel turn and the character change, the fans started to react to him more and were more interested in what he was doing. It wasn't no American Dragon, but a guy who was lucky. He ended up being in the right place at the right time, and because of this, he bought a little too much into his own hype. The greed of holding championship gold got to Bryan in storyline and caused him to undergo an entire character change. No longer was he the gutsy underdog, rather a cowardly paper champion. I wanted to make this video because, for one, I haven't made a Daniel Bryan video in 8 months, and two, I'm eager to make the mini John Cena Sheamus video, so expect that one in the very near future. With that said, the birth of the whole yes thing, Daniel Bryan being verbally abusive to his girl, acting like a douche, escaping challengers, let's get into it. So as I was saying previously, Daniel Bryan struggled to find any sort of success following Money in the Bank 2011. He was taking L's every single week with no end in sight. Some scratch that, many actually believed he would be the first man to fail to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase, but then all of a sudden, they inserted him into the Mark Henry storyline, and with the world's strongest man looking to heal his nagging injuries, WWE thought, why not Daniel Bryan? It just came out of nowhere how the decision was made the day of TLC, and Bryan was lucky to have been in the area signing autographs at a Kmart, because had that never been the case, I think we'd be looking at an entire different story. By the end of the night, he won a world title in WWE. The Henry thing is weird to me. Like, it's really looking like they were planning to have him hold the gold until, like, WrestleMania. It was really looking like that. I don't know if they were going to have Big Show win and then and there, but that's what I felt. Like, when I look at the Hall of Fame storyline, I just feel like it was grand enough to have ended at WrestleMania, not TLC. But with regards to Bryan, many felt as if there was zero chance he would win a world title. Why? While he did have some supporters in the company, there was also some detractors, with the biggest being the boss himself. As you can see, Bryan is a viable main event talent, add to that wasn't marketable in his eyes. So, him winning the title comes off as a shock when you look at it from the 2011 perspective. On the December 19th, 2011 episode of Raw, CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, and Zack Ryder came out to celebrate their championship victories the previous night. The whole thing from TLC 2011 is something I'd like to call the IWC's WrestleMania. It may have not drawn from a ratings perspective, it was actually the lowest drawing episode in years, but for diehards, it was a special night to see the men that they supported for months, hell years, stand before them as world champions, despite the fact that nobody set forth those kinds of expectations. It brought us this image, and this whole visual would be entirely insane to see in 2009. Hell, the beginning of 2011 itself. Bryan said that people never expected him to wrestle in WWE, let alone win the world title. Michael Cole was still trashing him, which at this point was completely overkill. Like, the man just didn't shut the hell up. He was ruining everything. He was ruining the product, and he was the #1 worst thing in my eyes from 2011. He said that the whole experience was unbelievable, and this is when the heels interrupted. They brawl, and this leads to a 6-man tag team main event. The good guys stood tall after Bryan forced Del Rio to tap and celebrated as the show went off the air. Meanwhile, Lazaro, Big Show talked about TLC, stating that it took him 9 years to win it, all for it to go away after 3 seconds. The loss caught him off guard, but he felt that it was his own fault, because he was the same man who convinced Bryan not to cash in at WrestleMania. Despite this, he showed some respect to the new champion, and this is when Josh Matthews of TNA showed up, insulting Big Show, telling him that his title reign is the shortest in history. He didn't do it outright, like he does in TNA, but he was kind of rude. Later that week on SmackDown, Big Show opened up the show to speak about Daniel Bryan. He clearly felt sad about Sunday, but was more reserved. Like, you could see the anger in him, but Show was more sorry. All of a sudden, Mr. Hall of Pain interrupts, and Henry felt that Big Show was dumb for being proud of that embarrassing accomplishment. Another reason for why he was here was for a rematch. Suddenly, the new champion appears in this image in itself. Odd. He said that both men couldn't believe that he's champ. Same as Monday, I'm not cool, not much charisma, but I'm here as the world heavyweight champion, yeah. But he bragged about being a good wrestler, hoping to be one of the greats. Mark responded saying that he's a pipsqueak and demanded a rematch for tonight. Big Show objects, mentioning how Henry lost at TLC, but it wasn't shameful. Why? Well, because the fans seen all 45 seconds of it. Teddy Long had to come out and sort this mess, and he booked those two in a matchup to determine the first challenger for the world title. About that match, well, David Otunga came out. It was odd for obvious reasons. But as for why Otunga was out here, apparently Mark Henry wasn't medically cleared to compete. Big Show, upon hearing this, decided to send Otunga back to law school with a nasty-ass punch, and Daniel Bryan, meanwhile, had to face Dolph Ziggler in the main event. The Show-Off managed to be a formidable opponent for Bryan, but once his buddy Swagger got involved, Big Show appeared. Because of this, well, you got the memo. 4 men are standing around at ringside on a Friday night. Teddy Long comes out. Bryan and Big Show stood tall, and in 1 week, Daniel Bryan managed to score more wins than he has in his second half of 2011. He got that world champion boost, like literally the weeks preceding TLC. He was losing to Del Rio, Wade Barrett, all kinds of guys, but now it was a different story. After saving Big Show for Mark Henry, the champ made such a huge deal about it to his girlfriend. Big Show tried explaining how giants don't need saving, and you could see how slowly that man's character was changing. Later in the night, Big Show's whooping Otunga's ass. Henry's ready to enter the ring when Bryan comes in and whacks him with a belt, and in the ring, Otunga eats a knuckle sandwich, but despite how this match went, Bryan felt that he was responsible. Big Show was slowly getting frustrated by some of this, and this is a win. Teddy Long booked the title match. Daniel Bryan will go one-on-one with the Big Show. You guys know how it goes. He laughed it up, but Bryan quickly bounced back, stating that regardless of what happens, his reign lasted longer than 45 seconds. AJ Lee, meanwhile, was raving on and on and on about how great Bryan is, whereas Alicia Fox was telling her that she hopes Bryan's ego can handle a loss. The champ took it as his girl not believing a win was possible, and Big Show, on the other hand, was hyped. He was ready for this match, stating that his confidence level was that high. He talked about how Bryan's a good wrestler, and this is when he interrupted. The good wrestler statement really hurt his ego. Suddenly, Big Show lays his hand on him, and he's like, "Get your damn hand off my shoulder." And the way he facially reacted, it's like me watching WWE 2018. Fast forward to the end of the night, Mark Henry's providing commentary, entertaining at that, and in kayfabe, the odds were in Big Show's favor. Bryan was constantly flexing his title for everyone to see, playing up that obnoxious champion role, and during the match, Big Show was pretty dominant. Despite the fact that Daniel was the de facto bad guy, he was clearly the underdog. Hell, Big Show broke free of the guillotine, the damn label lock, leaving Bryan completely clueless as to how he can best the giant. All of a sudden, the champion exits the ring and approaches Mark Henry, who shoves him straight to the ground. And because of this, Daniel Bryan won by DQ, and he celebrated like it was a well-fought victory. Big Show's placing the blame on Henry, and as for the other guy, he lives to fight another day. This only fueled the fire in him to continuously show off his title. Big Show was, of course, upset about the finish from Friday, and Bryan agreed. This title is too prestigious to end in a disqualification. Hell, he even offered a rematch. Big Show revealed that Teddy Long agrees not only was it a title match, but a no DQ, no count-out match. About that one, well, it was something. First of all, the world champion had to come out and criticize the fans taking another step towards being a full-fledged heel. He's constantly telling his fans that he didn't want a screwy ending or whatever, mentioned how fans on forums were saying he takes the easy way out, and then he complained about Henry getting involved and even called for him to get suspended. It was all talk, no substance. Because of this, the ex-champion proceeded to interrupt. He was completely salivating at the thought of getting his hands on Bryan. Add to that, he revealed that what the champ did last week got him banned from ringside. He was fuming. While this did anger him, a rematch for next week managed to turn that frown upside down. This, of course, upset Bryan, but he didn't want to show him. Also, AJ Lee professed her love for Daniel Bryan, and all he could respond with was, "Wow, thanks." I wanted to mention that because Bryan decided to bring her to the ringside. It was the first time they were seen together in the arena, and it made for a memorable moment. So during the match, Bryan, of course, tried his best to beat Big Show. He used a chair, went for several covers, but that 3 count was nowhere in sight. Big Show is gaining a hell of a lot of momentum until Bryan runs. Because of this, Big Show absolutely trucks AJ, running through her like a linebacker. Bryan was at a complete loss of words. Big Show was doing what he did best in the early 10s, and that's cry, and the commentary team was silent. This moment is more hilarious to me rather than shocking. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've seen it about a million times. Yeah, she was loaded and stretchered out of there, and as they're walking to the back, Bryan's like, "You can have the title. You can have it. You don't need to be that reckless." And to top it all off, he refused to allow him to the back, pointing the finger at him and calling him a bastard. Okay, I just want to say, Big Show crying is the 2010s version of Ric Flair blading. You know, I lost count on how many times he shed tears, but I just wanted to mention that. AJ sold that like $1 million, and it gave Bryan an excuse to blame Big Show and deflect any sort of attention towards the match itself. On that week's Raw, he came out to a somewhat negative response in order to update everyone on AJ. First of all, he trashed Big Show like WWE trashes cruiserweights, and he felt that as if the whole situation was intentional. Like Big Show didn't care about her, all he wanted to do was win the title. He even called the tears he shed crocodile tears. He was threatening to make Big Show pay, which sounded pretty funny, and the criticism didn't end there because on SmackDown, he called Big Show a bitter man. Bryan didn't hold himself responsible for AJ being out there and even went as far as to say, "AJ loves me." She loved him so much that she put herself in harm's way. The man was rapidly finding himself comfortable as a heel, and he was pretty damn good in ROH, but WWE is obviously a whole different story. While making this video, I stumbled upon a report that says Bryan was getting 0 reactions at house shows. This was before the heel turn, of course. Now it was the complete opposite. He was actually getting reactions. But anyways, his match with Mark Henry ended up being a lumberjack match. Henry really put a whooping on that boy, and the lumberjacks weren't doing him any favors as well. But after provoking them, they entered the ring and whooped his ass. Henry on the other side treated them like a joke, leading to an all-out brawl, and Bryan managed to find an opening and run. Fans were booing, Michael Cole was angry, and in the back, Teddy Long's like, "What's up?" He complained about being jumped, asked if a match was being planned on the moon, but that clearly wasn't the case because Teddy Long booked him in a steel cage match against both Big Show and Mark Henry. On the final SmackDown before the Rumble, Big Show apologized for his actions. Unfortunately, the champ wasn't too fond of this. He even claimed that AJ doesn't remember Big Show visiting the hospital. He was constantly provoking him with insults. "You're no Andre, you're a liar." Hell, he even suggested Big Show retire then and there. Then the dumbass proceeded to slap the hell out of the Giant, leading to him erupting. He shouted that Bryan's an arrogant ass, threw him around before Mark came out. He reminded them that it's a triple threat match, and Henry didn't give a damn about Big Show's feelings nor Bryan's Napoleon complex. He made the champ seem like such a huge chump and led to a main event pitting the Big Show against Mark Henry. Those two fought it out, a complete slugfest, but at the same time, Henry was still hurting. He was suffering from that ankle injury, and after the commercial break, the dumbass runs in and blasts Big Show with a chair. Turns out I was a dumbass because the strategy worked out very well. That is until he tried the label lock because Big Show escaped and almost KO'd him. So that's the build. They were trying to make it seem like Bryan is the unlikely champion, and there was doubts over whether or not he was actually going to win the match at the Rumble. Regarding the match itself, it wasn't anything special, but it was decent enough. Unfortunately, though, Henry was really hurt badly by the injury as it impacted the match. Bryan was really trying his best to escape, and that's exactly what happened. Big Show took another L when it matters, and Bryan was celebrating endlessly. Added to that, he was shouting yes. Speaking of that, before we move on, I gotta talk about the creation or inspiration behind the whole yes thing. Bryan was inspired to implement the yes thing from former UFC fighter Diego Sanchez. The next night on Raw, the World Heavyweight Champion interrupted CM Punk in order to talk about that cage match. He bragged about being a role model of vegan to CM Punk, who simply responded with, "Well, what do you eat?" He threatened to stick the pipe bomb where the sun don't shine, and Punk felt that Big Johnny was trying to stir things up between them because they're buddies, but he made the challenge to the World Champion. Suddenly, Sheamus comes out, the Royal Rumble winner, I should note. He teased challenging for both belts, but regarding that match, it was a highlight of that month. It wasn't outstanding or anything like that, but I consider it a gem. Not going to spoil who won it, although you most likely know what happened. Later that week on SmackDown, Teddy Long revealed that Bryan's defending the gold against 5 other men in an Elimination Chamber match. The opponents were Wade Barrett, The Big Show, Cody Rhodes, Mark Henry, and Randy Orton. Stacked card at the time. During the night, Michael Cole decided to interview the champ. Oddly enough, he actually admitted that he was wrong about Bryan. Champ told him that everything isn't about himself, and after Cole left, he suggested that the fans become vegan. He mentioned the dangers of eating meat, the benefits of abstaining from it, and of course this generated boos. Then he talked about how he shouldn't defend the title against 5 other men, including The Big Show. He complained about how he ran down AJ, and this is when he appeared. The role model statement really didn't sit well with Big Show, as the man was just a pompous, arrogant little ass in his eyes. Bryan decided to bounce back by repeatedly calling Big Show a loser, leading to a melee, and suddenly AJ made a return donning a neck brace. As he goes for the knockout punch, she comes in and prevents him from doing it. This generated a bunch of boosts for Bryan because of the fact that he's essentially manipulating his girlfriend. The story was heating up. Later that night, the champ stole the Viper spotlight. Why? Well, because they were set to face off on SmackDown the following week. Before that could happen, Bryan went one-on-one with the Big Show for the 100th time. The one thing that was different, however, was AJ. She was convinced by Bryan to come down to ringside, and there was nearly a sequel to that incident from January, and because of this, Bryan abandoned the match. Afterwards, he grabbed the mic and questioned Big Show's manhood, and even went as far as to claim that the whole accident from last month was on purpose. Again. He began talking about how protecting AJ is more important than anything, including the title, flexed about being a vegan, and promised to retain that title. Fast forward to Friday night, AJ finally spoke about the incident from January and her relationship with Daniel Bryan. Michael Cole buried her, stating that nobody knows or even cares about her, and he questioned why she was even at ringside, to which she responded, "Daniel loves me, want me there." She switched up the topic, talking about Cole's hatred for her boy in the Divas division. He was ready to dish out a burial promo, but she quickly shut him up for 2 seconds because people like him can't stay silent. He felt that she would throw herself in front of a moving bus for Daniel. Hell, even claimed that she has zero respect for herself. The heel champion finally interrupts and Cole bolts. He didn't like what Cole said about him, and instead of defending his girl, he preferred to talk about himself, went on a tirade towards a bunch of things including junk food, the environment, all that, and was trying to make himself look like a pious human. Despite the main event, Bryan was leaving with AJ in a Prius. Yup. Luckily, Teddy Long put a stop to this by threatening to strip Daniel of the title, and so the match goes on. It was entertaining stuff, and granted, I haven't watched it since 2012. I remember enjoying it. Randy Orton to me was the best damn worker in the entire WWE from May of 2011 to WrestleMania 28. The only guys that come close in my eyes were Dolph Ziggler and CM Punk. The man was putting on some of his best work in ring, and I consider it to be his very best year in ring, of course. He was on a whole other level that year. He was very, very, very motivated. Their first confrontation started to give everyone a little preview of their epic bouts 2 years later. But anyways, Orton was really building momentum. Bryan took notice and wanted none, and instead opted to provoke Big Show, who threw him back into the ring where he took an RKO. Those two ended up fighting, and SmackDown ended with Daniel Bryan, the instigator, smiling. This led to a Raw match between the two, which concluded with Daniel causing the DQ. He once again tried taking out the competition because Randy Orton demanded a match against him on SmackDown. Unfortunately for himself, that request would be denied because he's got a concussion. This also meant Orton was out of the chamber match, and meanwhile, Mark Henry was demanding a spot in the chamber match, which was taken away from him due to injury. He thought that was best for business, but Big Show made him look second-rate, causing a ruckus in order to get Daniel Bryan. He ended up being escorted out of the building like Orton, which made Daniel Bryan real comfortable, like WWF 2001 comfortable. The champion was claiming everybody's afraid of tapping out to him. He promised to win the chamber match and basked in his own glory. Teddy Long, however, wanted Bryan in a match, and since this man volunteered, the match is on. Oh, there he is, mini John Cena himself, Sheamus. That's a story for another day, but regarding this match, the champ managed to provoke Sheamus so badly, he spat on him, that he got himself disqualified. In other places, a battle royal was planned for the end of the night, and watching this thing, it was a lower card / jobber galore. Also, just watching and hearing the piped-in crowd noises makes it even more hilarious. Like, without any knowledge of SmackDown being taped, you think to yourself, why in the hell is Santino a jobber, and why in the hell isn't David Otunga main eventing shows? But anyways, Orton's replacement was a huge downgrade, and it showed how weak the roster was. The chamber match itself was good, not outstanding stuff like 2019 or 14, and just watching this, it's so weird to think that Daniel Bryan has 3 victories and 5 appearances. With that said, as he was set to enter the match, last entrant, by the way, Big Show grew impatient and decided to break through the pod in order to whoop his ass. By the time he was actually supposed to enter, he was down to the mat. Things were looking very bleak, but Rhodes and Barrett managed to get rid of him. Santino ends up stealing an elimination, and Rhodes' reaction is when he opened Twitter after that promo. He attacked Santino afterwards, but it didn't lead to that elimination, and the crowd was really clamoring for him to win it. Barrett dominated afterwards, causing destruction for a few minutes, but then at a moment's notice, Santino Marella got rid of him, and this is when Bryan licked his chops thinking that the match was his. But Santino had the roar of the crowd, he had heart, passion, and dedication, and things were looking really bad for him, but he was very smart with his tactics, catching Daniel with a roll-up, moving out of the way, and best of all, hitting that damn Cobra. The crowd was completely unglued at this point. It was some insane stuff, but Bryan kicked out and quickly locked him in the label lock. He tried fighting out, but unfortunately tapped out in the end. Oh my god. Man, what a rush that was. For a few moments, he made everyone believe that it could happen. I don't care if he was a jobber, comedy joke, or whatever. The fact that he got everyone thinking he could steal it is something. It was an incredible moment to see Santino have everybody behind him. It's crazy. After the match, Sheamus, looking like he was owed money, comes down and hits the Celtic Cross, and I grade this altercation an F because Sheamus didn't point to the WrestleMania sign. But yeah, that whole Santino thing reminds me of why pro wrestling is special. With that said, Bryan made his victory seem grand. Oh, nobody believed I'd win the chamber match, shouting yes repeatedly, when suddenly The Miz came out and shockingly praised him. Even made it seem like he saw Daniel Bryan as world championship material. Like, there was zero shame from this man. Sheamus, though, ruined everything. The Royal Rumble winner congratulated Daniel Bryan on being a massive arse. First of all, he wasn't no role model, rather a coward, and he accused him of hiding behind his girlfriend. That's fact. The Miz, though, stepped in, sucking up to the world champion when Sheamus responded, telling him that he should let the lads who have a match at WrestleMania talk. And this is when the champ strikes. Miz is an afterthought, and Sheamus is angry. At the end of the night, Bryan faced CM Punk, and the match itself served as a precursor to their feud, and I forgot that CM Punk had a feud with Chris Brown, of all people. I gotta make a bonus video out of it. Anyways, both men looked tough due to the finish itself, and this intensified the feud between the general managers of both brands and protected the guys. Bryan hit a superplex and went for a cradle, and Punk follows through as well, meaning it was a draw. Funny enough, though, they were raising the other brand's champions' arms. And again, story for another day. Because of this, a rematch was made for Raw, and the focus was more so on the guys outside rather than in the ring. Like, those two were the world champions, that the focus wasn't on them, which I find kind of odd. It was a mess. Teddy Long was ready to square up, and CM Punk was screwed. Sheamus, however, appeared, so it kind of advanced the story. Before he could fully focus on the Celtic Warrior, Daniel Bryan had to get through Randy Orton in his home state. Of course, he insulted his state, talking about how he moved to Las Vegas or whatever. And the main event itself didn't have an outright finish again, because Kane, of all people, interfered. Bryan showed his cowardice, leaving his girl alone in the middle of the ring, and Orton was destroyed. Full focus on Sheamus now. On the March 9th, 2012 episode of SmackDown, Michael Cole held a little interview with both Daniel Bryan and Sheamus. First of all, Cole asked Bryan, how much did luck attribute to your run in WWE so far? He denied luck having a factor to anything, saying that if you're good, you don't need luck. He credited his scientific wrestling skills, his vegan lifestyle. After that, he's got charisma for him being successful in the company. On the other side, Cole believed Sheamus needed luck to win the Rumble, and he didn't object to this statement, feeling that there was some luck involved with everything he's done so far, but he believes that you make your own luck. And he's like, at least I don't hide behind a girl. AJ tries responding, and Bryan's like, AJ, shut up. Ooh. That moment sticks out to me. Whenever I think about this title run, I always think about that moment as one of the first things. Sheamus felt Bryan should be wearing the skirt because he's a whiny wimp, and the Celtic Warrior promised his luck runs out at WrestleMania. Despite WrestleMania on the horizon, Bryan was more focused on being with his girl, shopping for dresses, and even told her that it looked way better on the mannequin, which gained him some additional heat. It's odd due to the fact that Bryan was, I don't know, the world champion heading into WrestleMania. Should have felt more grand. Rather than focusing on Sheamus, he was out here coaching, and what I find funny about this is the fact that Booker T is like, oh, he's ruining her career, and this was in spite of the fact that AJ won. Sheamus, meanwhile, was on one hell of a roll. He was like 95 overall, but his win streak came to an end after Daniel Bryan got involved in his match, leading to a count-out loss. He quickly bounced back though by kicking Jericho's head off, and there wasn't much going on between these two. Like, if you were to go without watching any of their segments, I can't really say you missed out. They ended up facing off in tag team action for the 17th time. Babyfaces won, but AJ took this little message to heart. Sheamus finally got his hands on Daniel and put a beating on him. Miz tags in, Bryan runs away, and Sheamus kicked his head so hard he thought his name was Jay Carter. Also, I gotta mention this. They faced off in another tag team match on Raw later that week. This time, Sheamus teamed up with Orton, whereas Bryan tagged with Kane. During the match, it was looking like Sheamus was gonna score that W, but his girlfriend got on the way, leading to a chokeslam from Kane, and Bryan finally beat the Celtic Warrior. I don't remember this at all. I legit thought the build featured Daniel Bryan running away and scoring 0 Ws. So the story of this match was simple. Bryan was all hiding behind his girl, and Sheamus was preparing to expose him for his weaknesses. That's all. It wasn't exactly the most memorable build due to the fact that they faced off in 4 tag team matches. Segments themselves don't really stand out, but the expectation was that it was going to be a good match. Sheamus and Bryan at the time were very well known for being some of the best workers in WWE. Add to that, they never got to face off on the official card last year. Guarantee they would try to steal the show. About their match, well, it was so good, memorable, I have to talk about the entire thing. They opened up the show, of course. Sheamus was all hyped. Bryan was more on the confident side, and one huge thing to note is that the champ was massively over. He had never been as over as he was in WWE like he was on this night. For the first time, he donned a special jacket, yesing his way to the ring. Bell rings, and Bryan's like, wait up, I gotta kiss my girl. He does just that, but once he turns around, bro kick. 1, 2, 3. It completely stunned the crowd, and it was the last thing they were expecting. And just like that, Daniel Bryan's title reign was over. Like, imagine going to grab a snack. By the time you come back, there's a new world champion. I'd be pissed. Now, in storyline, Daniel Bryan had been making fun of Big Show for losing his title in 40 seconds. Makes sense that karma in the form of an Irish Royal Rumble winner would come to bite him, but it shouldn't have gone down like that if we look at it from 2012's perspective. Daniel Bryan and Sheamus deserved more than this. However, it did so much for Bryan's career. Unthinkable things. Sheamus had made him look dominant as well, and anything other than a victory would have halted his momentum. I don't think anyone would change things looking at it from today because it gave Bryan more opportunities to show his comedic side, have better promos, and ultimately become a better performer and become the fans' guy. In an interview with GQ back in April of 2012, Daniel Bryan spoke about his disappointment towards WrestleMania 28, and I quote, "Of course I do. I was World Heavyweight Champion for 4 months. I wanted to go out there and steal the show. I was trained by Shawn Michaels, and that's what he's notorious for. I've always had the mindset that my wrestling is as good as or better than anybody out there. I was really looking forward to going out there and showing everybody what I can do on the biggest stage of them all, and I just wasn't able to." Okay, that's his title run. In my opinion, it wasn't very memorable or anything like that, but Bryan's character really started to stand out. Yeah, he was a much better performer all around. What do you guys think of Daniel Bryan's first title reign? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the cattle mutilation on the like button and perhaps the label lock on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.